Howard Thurman, he would use the language of you hear the sound of the genuine.
Genuine. Come
You
on.
find it first in yourself, and then you find it in others.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
when you know it's a human endeavor.
Welcome to all God's children, living epistles and words made flesh to a season of divine rest. Thank you for tuning in to the Raceless Gospel Podcast, where we gather this season to talk about the colonization of a communal phrase, stay woke, and how the African American community created their own poetic justice when they grabbed a comforter and a pillow. I am your host and podcast pastor, Starlette Thomas. Good Faith Media welcomes American Baptist Home Mission Societies as a proud sponsor of Season 6 of the Raceless Gospel Podcast. ABHMS affirms that justice is a sacred calling, and awareness of injustice, possible with eyes open or shut, is a spiritual discipline. For nearly 2 centuries, ABHMS has equipped bold change makers and faithful advocates across the U.S. and Puerto Rico to lead their beloved communities with vision and courage. This April in Cleveland, ABHMS hosts the 2026 Space for Grace and Spiritual Caregivers Conference, where storytelling takes center stage as a tool for faith leaders to liberate, connect, and transform. Learn more at abhms.org. Thank you, ABHMS, for your courage in the face of injustice.
Faith Commons is pleased to sponsor this season of the Raceless Gospel. We are an interfaith organization in Dallas, Texas, working to amplify diverse faith voices for the common good. Our country has a rich but endangered tradition of church-state separation. Yet true religious liberty aims for a robust pluralism, where people of all faiths and none are welcome to participate freely and fully in public life. Unfortunately, Christian nationalism and its twin sister, Christian supremacy, are ever-present threats. Faith Commons counters these threats by calling on all faiths to bring their spiritual reasoning to the commons. Listening to the unique sounds of these different voices, we hear a beautiful harmony that sings of what Dr. King called the beloved community. We hope you hear those same mystic chords of unity in the Raceless Gospel. Learn more at faithcommons.org.
This episode of the Raceless Gospel Podcast is sponsored by Invested Faith. The Invested Faith team partners with churches who believe faith is meant to change the world, through legacy gifts from congregations reaching their completion to individuals who believe God is not done healing our world. Invested Faith resources social entrepreneurs rooted in faith, building sustainable enterprises, and tackling unjust systems right in their own communities. Since 2021, more than 70 fellows across 26 states and D.C. have been supported. Leaders creating food justice initiatives, safe housing for survivors, forever homes for foster children, and multimedia projects calling the church to confront gun violence. Your congregation can join this movement. Partner with Invested Faith to stand alongside changemakers and expand what it means to live out the gospel. Learn more and connect at investedfaith.org. On today's podcast, I am joined by Curtis Paul DeYoung, who is an author, activist, and academic. He recently retired as co-CEO of the Minnesota Council of Churches. In this episode, we discuss why the peddlers of the hand-me-down talking points of human hierarchy should give it a rest. But first, won't you pray for us, and with me? God, who gets tired of human folly, who sends messages by way of prophets with warnings, instructions, reminders, threats of destruction. When are you going to answer the prayers of my ancestors? Didn't you hear them calling you? Didn't you hear them asking you, "How long, Lord?" And still, their descendants are fighting off hands determined to take us back to our knees. There is a backlog on their prayer requests for relief, for a moment's rest, for a day's pay, for a way of escape, for freedom, for a return home or a home in the sky, for family reunions, for divine wrath, for their quick and easy death, for the slow and painful death of their oppressors because of the harm they've suffered, the injustices they've faced, the brutality they've endured. The colonizers think they've gotten away with kidnapping, selling, renaming, raping, murdering, sizing up, cutting down, dismembering, disfiguring, defacing the imago Dei in your creation. Are we not chosen too? Would you not save us too? Bigots, the white supremacists, are not tired of hating, displacing, disturbing the land and our peace. Why don't you curse them? Is vengeance in your possession or not? Open the sky and talk to me. Where is the cosmic vindication, the holy retribution, the plagues and pronouncements, the woes? Why didn't Jesus come back and save them? I thought you would punish our enemies. Whose side are you on? We are tired of waiting, of being patient, of being understanding and forgiving, of hoping for brighter days only to be named after the darker ones, of being hated, of being compared to and for and by, of being targeted and teased, of being mistreated and abused, of being the bigger person, of being resilient, of helping everybody but ourselves. We are tired and could sleep for years. We are owed as much. So give it all a rest. We want rest from our labors and from fighting against white body supremacy to find safety behind our eyelids and at least when we close our eyes. Giving honor to the ancestors who pretended, who couldn't be themselves, who couldn't say how they really felt, without threat of violence and even death, who couldn't get a hearing. Listen to the testimony of George M. Horton, written in 1824. To Mr. Horace Greeley, Sir. From the information of the President of the University of North Carolina, to wit, the Honorable D.L. Swain, who is willing to aid me himself, I learned that you are a gentleman of philanthropic feeling. I therefore thought it essential to apply to your beneficial hand for some assistance to remove the burden of hard servitude. Notwithstanding, sir, there are many in my native section of the country who wish to bring me out, and there are others far too penurious, which renders it somewhat dubious with regard to my extrication. It is evident that you have heard of me by the fame of my work in poetry, much of which I am now too closely confined to carry out, and which I feel a warm interest to do. And, sir, by favoring me with a bounty of $175, I will endeavor to reward your generosity with my productions as soon as possible. I am the only public or recognized poet of color in my native state, or perhaps in the Union born in slavery, but yet craving that scope and expression whereby my literary labor of the night may be circulated throughout the whole world. Then I forbid that my productions should ever fall to the ground, but rather soar as an eagle above the towering mountains, and thus return as a triumphing spirit to the bosom of its God who gave it birth, though now confined to these loathsome fetters. Please assist the cowering vessel to arise and live a glad denizen the remnant of his days and one of active utility. Yours respect, George M. Horton, of color. Our sacred reading is taken from the African American literary canon. Hear the words of Saint Toni Morrison. If you can only be tall because somebody's on their knees, then you have a serious problem. And my feeling is, white people have a very, very serious problem. And they should start thinking about what they can do about it. This is Starlette Thomas, your podcast pastor, and we'll be right back. Are you ready to engage your congregation in the work of justice? CBF Congregational Advocacy helps churches reframe their mission work and ask bold new questions. If you've been feeding children in your community for 10 years, why are there still hungry children? By using the traits of thriving congregations, CBF Congregational Advocacy helps your church love your neighbors, do justice, and bring hope to your community. If you're already advocating for your neighbors, why not take it to the next level? Visit cbf.net/advocacy network to join the Advocacy Network and become an advocacy mobilization partner. CBF Congregational Advocacy, loving our neighbors, doing justice, and bringing hope to our communities and our world. The world needs progressive leaders more than ever. Whether you're deconstructing your faith, called to care for the spiritual needs of others, seeking justice in your community, or simply want to deepen your understanding of Scripture, United Theological Seminary of the Twin Cities will help you become the progressive leader the world is waiting for. United offers certificates, master's, and Doctor of Ministry degrees with over 24 concentrations. Every degree program can be completed entirely online and part-time. Whatever you are called to do, United is ready for you. Receive an automatic $1,000 scholarship when you apply by October 15th for the spring 2026 term at unitedseminary.edu. This is Starlette Thomas, welcoming you back to this episode of the Raceless Gospel Podcast. I want to introduce to some, and present again to others, Curtis Paul DeYoung, who is an author and editor of 13 books on racial justice, reconciliation, social justice activism, and cultural competency. His newest book is The Risk of Being Woke: Sermonic Reflections for Activists. Today's conversation employs the tradition of call and response, a sacred back and forth practiced in the African American religious experience during the sermon's delivery. Feel free to talk back to us in the Amen Corner. I want to dive in. So my first question to you is this. Why do Americans continue to buy into a narrow vision of belonging? Why won't the peddlers of human hierarchy give it a rest?
Well, you're not going to mess around today, so we'll start off and get right at it. One thing is we have a long history of white supremacy and defining ourselves against whiteness. And that's no matter who we are as U.S. citizens, the standard of definition has been whiteness from the very beginnings. You can read it in Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and the ways they talked about what it meant to be a citizen of the United States and this vision that they had for this country, which was obviously built on the enslavement of African people and the dislocation and almost elimination of indigenous people to create a land for white Europeans. And so it's just, we have a long tradition of it. I mean, even in the fact that we've co-opted the term American, which of course it comes from European, Italian roots, but there's the North America, the South America, and there's Central America, there's the islands. But if you say someone's an American, they're talking about a white person in the United States typically. And so we have just been raised and trained and taught. So that's one reason we continue to buy into a narrow vision of belonging, because that's what we know. Second, it benefits us in some form or fashion. And it's not just a benefit of personal benefit, but it's a national economic benefit built around whiteness. And so we see in the current administration, have been much more blunt and out there about the ways they're protecting whiteness. So they eliminate refugee resettlement that keeps people of color from coming into the country, pushes many out through ICE. Talk about birthright citizenship, so you can try to even get rid of folks that are already citizens of color. I mean, it's an incredibly bold and blunt white nationalist agenda. So that's why the peddlers are not going to give it a rest because it still benefits them and benefits them economically, benefits their narcissism and their egos, and the challenge is, again, it's so interwoven into who we are that most white people do not think of themselves as being white. The de facto definition of humanity in the United States, if not worldwide, is white. And so there are white people not having a conversation about whiteness. And people of color are struggling with having to live within this context. It struck me that we often talk about someone being the first Black actor, the first Latina beauty pageant winner. I'm going, you can only be first if it's in a context as white. Or if it was about being humans, there would just been one first, a human, and then
Exactly.
from there on. I mean, so it's just locked into everything.
Well, thank you for spelling that out and for naming the fact that with the Raceless Gospel podcast, we don't mince words. We are after the truth, and we are after folks who we respect as truth tellers. You being one of them. My second question is this: then, against that backdrop, will there ever be a racial reckoning, air quotes, as was once expected after the gruesome murder of George Perry Floyd Jr.? If so, then when? If not, then why should activists continue to enlist in the fight for equal treatment in an imbalanced society, putting their bodies on the line for a time outlined only in their minds? What say you?
As you might know, I live in Minneapolis. Today I'm 10 blocks, sitting 10 blocks away from where George Floyd was killed and where we still remember that day and that death and what he's meant to us. And his family members and others still um, hold vigil at that site as people come to think about it. And that was one of the interesting calls that came out of that moment of protest and unrest, and a short moment of hope as the protests originally were multiracial in their participation. Much like the moment after Barack Obama was elected, there was a pause and a moment of hopefulness, and that maybe racial reconciliation was going to become a reality. But the term racial reckoning, I like the term because the idea of reckoning means that there's something that has to be dealt with, something that has to be addressed. And I do think that we settled for a cosmetic form of reckoning. So, all at once, a number of corporations, backbone of a capitalist society, made commitments around what they were going to do, how much they were going to spend, how many Black people they were going to hire, how many DEI programs they were going to launch.
Say
Some of
that.
them were done with legitimate and real intent, I think, and some of them did make difference for a short term. But a racial reckoning is a long-term process. We got 400 plus years of history to reckon for in this country, let alone the global colonial realities that this was born out of. So it didn't happen. It did give us a season, though, to bring back things like conversations on reparations, a chance to really name what was the some of the central issues, and to name that it was not just racist policing that we're dealing with. Racist policing is the guardian of a greater racial supremacist society. It's just one piece, but we had to deal with the structures. But obviously, the more serious that conversation got and the more traction it gained, the more pushback there was. And there just wasn't the courage at the national level. And once again, back to the same question, the compromises that came in, and now we have an all-out pushback and dismantling of what was done. I do think there was some good things that happened at the grassroots, some smaller efforts, and a lot of times this work is going to have to happen locally uh, to be able to sustain it long term.
Thank you for naming the need for courage. Um, I can't, I don't think I can put into words how completely disappointed I am at the response to George Perry Floyd Jr.'s cries. I thought that video, it's one of the most gruesome
Right.
in our history, and it's recorded. And for persons to be able to forget about it, to forget about him. And I went down there a couple days before the verdict came in, and the grief was palpable. I remember a young lady being dropped off. The gentleman waited in a pickup truck, and she got out of the truck and faced the building and screamed at it.
Mhm.
She just she just screamed at it, and we all at first, people started looking, and then we just looked away. People just agreed to look away and to give her the time and space to lament, to grieve, and to express her rage. And she screamed at that building. It couldn't have been more than 10 minutes or so, but she screamed until she fell to her knees. And she wept and wailed, and then she picked herself up. No one touched her. No one said anything to her. No one got close to her. She picked herself up. She got back into the truck, and they drove away. And it's seeing things like, and it was done day after day. People would come in and I know I did. I laid where his body was. Persons would come over and pray and cry and shake their fist at the building. I don't know how we could witness that type of brutality and then look away from what we said we were going to do. Look away from what we saw, the barbaric brutality that was experienced there. That will always be a low point for me. And I will always say his name. I will always remember him because we came outside during a pandemic.
Right.
It was such such an awful thing to bear witness to in the midst of so much death. I'll never forget it. So I can't express how disappointed I am in our country and its citizens and their lack of courage. We got the courage to do all these other things, but we can't face this. We can't reckon with this.
Which is why the peddlers of human hierarchy don't give it a rest.
Yeah.
'Cause they want us to keep moving away from the pain, moving forward in the way things have always been, and to just put it into the past tense or put it into something. I just need to think about something else. Certainly, as we are speaking, what's happening in Gaza is horrific, yet as a world,
Hmm.
and we've seen this coming for some time.
They're starving to
Um,
death now.
yes, and yet we still seem to be able to look the other way. That's tragic.
It says something about us as human beings,
Right,
the level
right.
of numbing
Yeah.
that we've experienced, and the brutality that they're experiencing is not new. This is the
No.
same tactic that has been used, for
Right.
hundreds of years, dare I say
Yeah.
thousands of years. And so we
Yeah.
know how this goes, and yet we let it continue. Um, it just I'm just led to lament.
Mhm.
And yet, the questions remain, that require interrogation. And I think that if we don't question how we got into this space, these spaces, these head spaces, and how we are able to look away, that we'll continue to move past it. And I can't. You put your knee on somebody's neck for that long, and you look at
Right.
people and in hopes of a response to say, I've got the power, I'm on top of you. There's something to be said for that. You have to
Right.
account for that, and why he felt that he felt so comfortable to do it for that long. Needless to say, his death continues to reverberate in my body. and to bring up so
Mhm.
many other questions. His death and the way in which he died was so brutal, so unbelievable, so unjustified, that there's just no way I'm going to move past it. I'm never going to move past it. I'll continue to say his name.
I think that um, we need to learn how to sit in and stay with the grief and the pain. And I think that's more true even for white people, because we do not have the daily reality of microaggressions and racism and that. And so we have a kind of privilege when it comes to these places of pain that we have to choose
Mm.
to stay, to sit, to listen, to learn, to feel, if we are going to be a part of any moving forward, it'll only come out of that kind of deep sense of understanding and listening and and feeling. I mean, I just think that's so important. And so and we don't have to. We we have no felt need to do that. So hopefully we have a faith need to do that, that holds us there.
That's so well said. I just don't understand why we can't see ourselves and our world any differently, which leads me to my next question. Writer Adrienne Marie Brown said we are in an imagination battle.
Mhm.
How do you respond to the attacks on imaginaries and to a generation who has heard the nightmarish conditions their grandparents lived through?
Yeah, well, we have to be able to envision something that we haven't actually seen or experienced in its fullness.
Yes.
Um, I know you and I are both Howard Thurman people, that's what sustains us in this work, in this journey.
Yes, it does.
And Howard Thurman said in The Luminous Darkness, that the burden of being black and the burden of being white is so heavy that it is rare in our society to experience oneself as a human being. And that's where it begins, is we have to be able to dream. We've got to be able to place ourselves fully in that sense of what it means to be human. And if we're so busy being what society has designated us to be and not living into our full humanity created in the image of God, then we will lack the imagination, because the imagination will be narrow. It won't include everyone, what we envision. It'll have a hierarchy of has and have-nots, and it'll probably have a gender divide of some sort. And just because we lack, but yet if we are all created in the image of God, then we all share the possibility and the ability to envision something. And I think the Bible and other scripture, sacred texts give us visions of possibilities of what this could look like. In the Christian faith, we often talk about Revelations chapter 7, as the whole world gathers around the throne in their various cultural, wearing the robes of their culture, speaking their language, and yet finding a kind of human oneness. That vision was listed as a heavenly vision, but it was told to say we can do that here more. We need to live more like that. So, but it's hard when you're tired and when you face roadblocks and you setbacks. And I mean, George Floyd's death is what, 5 years ago? That's not that long.
It's
I
not.
mean, I just the hope that came out of that moment of horrific tragedy, as the world watched, as young people particularly, but a very multi-generational, multicultural, multiracial response in its early days. But imagination requires an ability to survive, to sustain, to share that conversation with others. Imagination doesn't start in just one person's head. It's a communal project.
Yes, it is.
And it has to include everyone who's a part of the vision, who needs to be in the vision. And that's again why it's a human project and not a race-based project, but it's a human project in the midst of a race-based society.
You just can't go wrong with Howard Thurman. My jaw's
Thank
hurt.
you.
I've smiled as soon as you start speaking his words, which are otherworldly and yet rooted and
Yes.
and planted firmly in the now. It's just
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah.
and he does in fact sustain me. He reminds me that there are other ways of being, and that there's a place in me that white body supremacy can't get to, and that I
Right.
have refuge within myself. And he sees it. You don't
Yeah.
often come across people with the eyes to see, and I know he's seen it because I've seen it. When you talk about
Yeah.
that shared vision, that shared
Yep. Yep.
dream, when you come across people who have, and you can hear it in the way that they speak, you know
Mhm.
immediately he's
And with
seen it.
Howard Thurman, he would use the language of you hear the sound of the genuine.
Genuine. Come
You
on.
find it first in yourself, and then you find it in others.
Yes.
And that's
Yes.
when you know it's a human endeavor. But he had language, he had vision beyond and ahead of his times.
Woo.
Um, I'm presently just doing a little research on his mentoring practices and the people he mentored. And there's a new kind of thing out there called critical mentoring, like critical theory, critical pedagogy. So it's mentoring with the idea of social systems and racial justice in mind.
Mm,
So
mm,
he certainly
mm.
was doing that with the folks because he was the mentor to the civil rights movement,
Absolutely.
as you know. But he also had this other mysticism piece that gave him the insights, deep spiritual, godly insights woven with the social justice agenda, which will be required for us if we are going to imagine something new.
Which required also the embrace of our ecological system. He talked to
Hmm.
trees,
Yep. Oh,
sat
yeah.
by the water. That man spoke to me. He must have seen me on down the way because he gives me such permission for the
Right.
things in which I feel compelled to do, like
Right.
hug a tree, like sit by
Yep.
the water and
Yep.
speak to it or weep
Yep.
through it.
Yep.
I just want to thank God for Howard Thurman. And I thank God for you. You have a book out. You recently wrote a book titled The Risk of Being Woke, a
Yep.
sermonic reflections for activists. In your estimation, what can the North American church offer an overstimulated and sleep deprived populace tired of what Toni Morrison names as the white gaze? I think she's quoting James Baldwin, in fact, when she's having this conversation about the little white man on your shoulder.
Right. And clearly, that's a great word picture,
Mm.
white gaze. And you read the autobiography of Malcolm X, and he talks about how the white gaze made him straighten his hair, burn his head with lie to have hair like a white person. And the Nation of Islam helped him reclaim his blackness, and then Mecca helped him reclaim his sense of being human. I mean, so the that white gaze is an important thing to hold on to and to think about, and it affects us all. For whites, it's just as natural as putting on the
Mm,
glasses,
mm, mm,
and
mm.
that's the white gaze. If I don't switch lenses, I'm just de facto raised with the white gaze. Yeah, but BIPOC folks, people of color in the U.S., anyone that's come in, anyone that's grown up here is affected by the white gaze because it's just everywhere. And so you have to intentionally think different about it. I wrote this book, The Risk of Being Woke, to try to encourage activists, faith-based activists in particular, Christian activists, out of the reality of George Floyd in that season. I used the text of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead and waking him up. Uh, and so Lazarus was woke. Obviously, I used the definition of woke from its original African American culture definitions of staying alert, staying aware. Racism is out there everywhere. And so you need to be prepared for that. I wrote that. It was published in 2023, not knowing that it would be even more relevant now in 2025. Recently preached at Rainbow Push in Chicago
Yes, you did.
on this subject, and I took the same message and brought it into 2025 and realized I missed a couple things that I think will actually speak to your question. Because the text that I used was the Lazarus text and the what we call the Palm Sunday, the triumphal entrance text, which in John are traced simultaneously. And so as you watch that, I came up with three responses that weren't in the original message and in the book, but that in this season, we see that Jesus on his way after he raised Lazarus from the dead and there's death threats on them, uh, hides. He and the disciples get out of town and they hide. And that lets me know is there's a season where we need safe space and you need to find it however. If you're under attack because of what's happening in our world and you don't feel safe, you have the freedom to hide. Jesus hid, you can hide. The next thing that struck me is that when Jesus did come out of hiding, he went to the home of Lazarus, Mary, and Martha. And I like to refer to them as woke Lazarus and activist Martha and mystic Mary. And mystic Mary understood what Jesus needed. And so she washed his feet, an act of self-care for Jesus. And in that first century Jewish context, the feet symbolized action. So by washing the feet, she was preparing Jesus for action, but there was self-care that had to come before taking action. And so we should feel very much in our rights as people of faith to hide when we need to, if we're under attack, to survive, and to take care of ourselves, to rest, as you speak so eloquently of rest as resistance. And then there's going to be a time that we're going to need to shout. And the entry into Jerusalem was a protest march, the largest demonstration that Jesus led against the empire. And but and it was a mass group of folks coming, but it was timed and it was at a moment when people were taking care of themselves. So, I think that we need to know what season we're in. And as you and others have pointed out, right after the election, it was important, particularly for African Americans and particularly for African American women, given the Kamala Harris campaign and the investment in it, to step back, to rest, and to recover. And also realize that a big part of dealing with white nationalism, white supremacy, is that there needs to be some courage among white people to step up and challenge their own people about this mess that's going on, that's happening in their families, in their communities, in their neighborhoods. And so, for some time now, people of color have been telling white people to do their own work. Well, now's the time. And
Make it plain, Doc.
if you're behind, there's enough good books out there to read so you can understand it and know what's actually going on. But so when the hands-off protest movement emerged, I wasn't surprised to see so many of my African American friends, at home taking a nap or out fishing or playing golf or doing something just to take care of themselves. I mean, it was important and it was needed. And
It's
and
also protest.
it took the hands off folks a few moments to really understand that they didn't have the full. There was no, in the initial 3 points that they made, there was nothing about diversity, equity, inclusion, or racism listed. So they had even missed in their own planning of it the key constituencies of the civil rights movement and actually what was being dismantled by this government. They got a good portion of it. So what they did was good, but it wasn't enough. And so I think we're now coming around with protests against boycotts of Target and other kinds of things happening that are strategic. But this is going to be a long haul process. So if you wear yourself out, then you're not able to sustain yourself.
Well said. Because the rest is also protest. It's an act of defiance that you will not
Yes.
wear me out.
Yeah, I
That
mean that's always been true. My understanding of the history of enslavement in the United States is that Africans on plantations would slow down as an act of resistance.
Mhm.
Somehow that came through the nature of white stereotypes as being lazy.
Mhm.
No, it was an act of resistance.
All right.
Still had to work because your life depended on it, but to slow down.
Okay.
So yeah.
One final question. What is your
Sure.
message to activists who suffer from white fatigue, who are tired of the narcissistic narrative of white body supremacy, and who have decided to give themselves a break?
Um, Enjoy your break. I mean, I think it's deserved. I don't think it's forever though, because we're going to need to come back and do stuff. But it's just 6 months into this administration, so we got a little ways to go. Um, I would, I think for white people who may actually be experiencing some white fatigue for the first time themselves, because you're seeing a kind of whiteness that's out there
Uh-huh.
that is just much more raw and real, and has always been cloaked in some sort of covering, whether it be liberalism or whatever we want to call it. And so is to get a better sense of what this is about, and hopefully white people that are feeling an experience of white fatigue is because they're doing battle against whiteness. They're taking it on. And we, as social justice activists who are white, also have limitations, but we have the ability to go further because we're not dealing with microaggressions and daily racism. So we have more. Now we also need to do self-care. We need to take care of ourselves because we need to be in it for the long haul because it's going to take all of us. But I do think we will need to come back around to that time where we begin to imagine again what a future could look like. And that cannot be done just by white people by themselves, or we're back all into the same situation. So folks of color who are resting, well-deserved rest, will have to at some point step back into the work. And you can let them know when that is, Starlet.
Don't put that on me. Oh, yeah, let this go on record. Don't give me the calendar date for when we're supposed to know. Even though I do have a strong sense of discernment that it is not now.
No.
It is not
Yeah.
now that they need to continue to lay those bodies down and rest.
And if you are going to do work, do the local work, do
Mm.
the neighborhood, getting your local church ready, working on the campaigns in your own communities if you're politically minded, because we need to be putting together the kind of coalition
Mm.
that's going to be necessary and the kind of relationships and connections that will sustain us. But yeah, I think that people need to experience what you so aptly said in the article you wrote about this, that being able to rest, which is something that African Americans have not been
Yes.
able to do in 400 years of
Yes.
existence in North America.
It's very true. And the fact that we woke up and no pun intended, woke up, and I know I did, I felt a strong sense of I'm tired, I'm going to lay
Mhm.
down, and I'm not going to do another thing. And then it just
Right.
built from there. To where I just
Mhm.
take naps, I nod off in conversations. I just rest my eyes. Like, why not? Because I'm so used to being, and especially when you're in spaces that are where you are marginalized, you're used to being hyper surveilled and then making
Yeah,
sure that
yeah.
your eyes are going on throughout the room to make sure that you're okay and you're in a safe space. To
Yeah.
to just stop doing that, it has been quite restorative.
Yeah.
It's been quite restorative. I didn't realize how tired I was or how much
No,
work
right.
is required to supervise your body and to make sure that you're okay all of
Right.
the time. It also required that you just pull away from those spaces, which I was
Right.
doing anyway. But I would
Right.
encourage persons who are listening to this podcast to take another nap, to do what your
Mhm.
ancestors could not, to give yourself a break. And in order to give it a rest in terms of white body supremacy, because you won't get it. I said it in my
Yeah.
book that I had to go and prepare a place for me free from white body supremacy. And the only way you can do that is to take your rest and to define those spaces for yourself.
And to the white people listening, we need to not go and interrupt those spaces.
Right.
So one of the things I learned from the young Black Lives Matter activists was the concept of black space.
Mm.
Uh, when I worked in Chicago, um, the BYP, Black Youth Project 100 folks, I'd interact with them, and I said, "Well, I'll stop by the office and see you," and they go, "No, it's black space." And I said,
Listen.
"Fine." I mean, because the reality is, some of that rest will happen even if you're with your colleagues who if they're white. You need just space to be because the term white body is therefore important. I may be the best person in the world, but my white body sends signals that I don't intend it to send just because of the history in this country. And so I need to be able to step away and not and feel and trust black people to do what they need to do in their spaces and not just think that I have to be there.
Well said. Thank you for that note of instruction, because it does. Bodies that are racialized as white do many times put persons who are racialized as black on alert to be prepared to defend themselves, not even from violence, but for being. Like to explain why we are here and what we are talking about. And I think that goes back to slavery and that overseer. And for which we could use a break from that as well. So thank you for giving everybody instructions. I hope everybody's clear. Everybody has instructions on what you need to do during this season of rest. Thank you, Dr. DeYoung.
Good to see you.
Wise.
Thank you for the invitation. Stay woke.
I want to thank our guest, Curtis Paul DeYoung, and extend to you, our listeners, an invitation to be delivered from the performance that white body supremacy demands. Show's over. Give it all a rest. This concludes this episode of the podcast and the conversation. Go lay down and rest. On next week's episode of the Raceless Gospel Podcast, we'll hear from Robert Callahan and discuss the joy of missing out on manufactured social strivings, strategically choosing instead to sleep on it. Good Faith Media welcomes American Baptist Home Mission Societies as a proud sponsor of Season 6 of the Raceless Gospel Podcast. ABHMS affirms that justice is a sacred calling, and awareness of injustice, possible with eyes open or shut, is a spiritual discipline. For nearly 2 centuries, ABHMS has equipped bold change makers and faithful advocates across the U.S. and Puerto Rico to lead their beloved communities with vision and courage. This April in Cleveland, ABHMS hosts the 2026 Space for Grace and Spiritual Caregivers Conference, where storytelling takes center stage as a tool for faith leaders to liberate, connect, and transform. Learn more at abhms.org. Thank you, ABHMS, for your courage in the face of injustice.
Faith Commons is pleased to sponsor this season of the Raceless Gospel. We are an interfaith organization in Dallas, Texas, working to amplify diverse faith voices for the common good. Our country has a rich but endangered tradition of church-state separation. Yet true religious liberty aims for a robust pluralism, where people of all faiths and none are welcome to participate freely and fully in public life. Unfortunately, Christian nationalism and its twin sister, Christian supremacy, are ever-present threats. Faith Commons counters these threats by calling on all faiths to bring their spiritual reasoning to the commons. Listening to the unique sounds of these different voices, we hear a beautiful harmony that sings of what Dr. King called the beloved community. We hope you hear those same mystic chords of unity in the Raceless Gospel. Learn more at faithcommons.org.
This episode of the Raceless Gospel Podcast is sponsored by Invested Faith. The Invested Faith team partners with churches who believe faith is meant to change the world, through legacy gifts from congregations reaching their completion to individuals who believe God is not done healing our world. Invested Faith resources social entrepreneurs rooted in faith, building sustainable enterprises, and tackling unjust systems right in their own communities. Since 2021, more than 70 fellows across 26 states and D.C. have been supported. Leaders creating food justice initiatives, safe housing for survivors, forever homes for foster children, and multimedia projects calling the church to confront gun violence. Your congregation can join this movement. Partner with Invested Faith to stand alongside changemakers and expand what it means to live out the gospel. Learn more and connect at investedfaith.org. I want to thank our guest, Wendell Griffin, and extend to you, our listeners, an invitation to give yourself a break, to rest your eyes, to yawn wide, to stretch long, to snooze and snore without threat of an alarm clock, because rest is resistance.